So I wanted to get all fancy and use a milling machine to create all the brackets for the plane, but I just lost my job, and so I didn't get the milling machine, so I can't get that right now. But I still want to make headway on the plane, so I'm going to make the brackets the old-fashioned way, probably the way that a lot of people do it. Either use a bandsaw, that would really be ideal, I think, but that cheapo bandsaw isn't variable speed, and the blade speed is too fast. I don't want to mess around with changing it to variable speed motor. So I'm just going to use a jigsaw. It's probably a way that a lot of folks will do it. Just put the metal cutting blade in, and I'll just use a low speed. And I'm going to start just with the square brackets that the compression tubes sit against, and that'll make sense as we go. You'll see they're the simplest brackets, so I thought that'd be the easiest one to start with. I'm just going to cut a 2-inch wide piece straight across here, and actually I'll do that 2 times and then a little bit more. And I'll cut each of those into a 2-inch wide chunk. And then I'm going to drill 3 holes in those. The holes will be slightly less than a 1/4 inch, and then I will ream them to a 1/4 inch so that they're a perfect 1/4 inch final dimension. So that's what I'm going to start with. Alright, so I've measured carefully, clamped a straight edge here. You could freehand it, but I'm going to use a straight edge for this one. And let's see how this thing cuts. I'm going to run it at a pretty slow speed. And I'm not pushing real hard, just let the blade do the cutting. Looks like it's cutting straight. Sometimes the blade will veer off to one side or another. And bind. Feels like this one's cutting quite straight. Okay, we're right at 2 inches. So my intent, once this is cut, will be to put a finer belt on my oscillating belt sander just to get a little cleaner edge on this. This edge is pretty clean, that one's clean, so that'll take off just a tiny fraction, just to smooth out the edges. One of the important things when you're fabricating metal parts is not to have sharp corners, because stress focuses, it gets focused in those corners, and that's where cracks tend to happen. So you want smooth edges, you don't want any scratches. Even a scratch, from what I understand, stresses can form just in a scratch even. So you want smooth edges and a smooth surface. So this comes with a plastic coating on it. Maybe you can see it here. So you leave that on and it protects the metal while you're working with it and while it's being shipped and so forth. So I won't take that off until probably as late in the game as I can. So there's no binding. It looks like it's cutting nice and straight, and I'm just letting the blade do the work and just applying very little pressure on the saw. So I'll just keep going here. It's cutting pretty nicely. At the very end, the saw bumped into my clamp here, which is sticking out a little bit, and the saw veered off to the left. Turns out there'll end up being a little bit of waste material at the end of this piece. If there were no such thing as a saw kerf, I could go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I could get 6 out of this. But the saw kerf gets rid of some of the material. That's the slit of metal that the saw cuts away. So when I'm done cutting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brackets out of this 12-inch wide piece, this last piece will be, I don't know, 1 3/4 inches wide or something, not wide enough. So that's waste material. So since I screwed up this end, I'll just make sure that this is the waste material, and I'll get this bracket moved over for the next cut, so the saw doesn't run into it. But yeah, it's not a bad cut. Just a second or two on the belt sander will clean that right up, I think. So I cut 4 of the 5 pieces out, but now I'm left with this, and it's kind of small. It's hard to clamp and put a straight edge on there. So I thought, what the heck, I'll put this bimetal blade on here that I've got and just see how it works. The feed is too fast, I think, but this aluminum is soft. Maybe it'll work okay. I think the feed for aluminum is supposed to be 1,000 to 2,000 feet per minute, and I read in the manual the other day that this is about 3,000 feet per minute, so let's just see what happens. Wow. Okay. I assumed that because the feed of the saw was faster than what I had read was appropriate for aluminum, that it, I don't know, there'd be some kind of problem. But holy cow, that is awesome. I'm not going to use the jigsaw for any more of these. I'm just going to use this, and I'll have less waste as well, because this is thinner than the bandsaw or than the jigsaw blades, so there'll be a smaller kerf and less waste. Very cool. I'm going to start using this for all the well, at least for some of the bracket cutting. For curves, it might not turn sharp enough. I've got a narrower blade. This is 3/8. I've got a 1/4 inch blade that I think might be a metal blade. I don't remember for sure, but I'll give it a shot and see how it goes. That cut through this like butter. That was fantastic. I keep being blown away by this little saw. I think it was $100 at Home Depot. If you're going to build a plane, you've got to get a little bandsaw. If you've got a big, great, expensive, fancy one, that's fantastic. That's better. But for the price, this is a must-have tool for building a plane. So what I did here, I just took the miter attachment from my table saw, and this oscillating belt sander has a miter slot. I slid it in there, clamped it. That gave me a 90-degree surface here, so I could make sure that those brackets are square. And it's not critical, but just trying to make them look nice. And this, I'm not sure what grit this belt is, but I think it's a little bit rough. So what I'll do, well, now that I did that, you can see the surface. Yeah, I got a reflection even. It's still a little bit of a rough surface, but at least the edges are square. What I need to do now is take some measurements and just try to get them as close as I can to 2x2. Again, that's not critical, but I'll get it as close as I can. And what I'll do is get a finer belt just to try to get a little smoother finish on these guys. And then I'll come up with some kind of jig that'll let me easily drill them. And I'll drill them one drill bit size under 1/4 inch, and then you're supposed to ream them to 1/4 inch. So next thing I'll probably have to do is go to Home Depot and get a finer belt for the belt sander. And I'll probably replace this one too, because this is the only one I've ever had.